Welcome and good evening. Thank you for joining us tonight to the Metro Chamber's Candidates Forum. As a business group with the longest history and the largest membership in the Capital Region, we view advocating on behalf of the business community as one of our key responsibilities, and that's why we're here tonight. Next June, the City of Sacramento will elect a new mayor, a new leader to not only continue the momentum Mayor Johnson and the business community have started, but to expand and grow the Sacramento region as the place to live and work. With nearly 1,700 members in the six-county region, the Metro Chamber represents the region at large. With that said, the capital city is at the heart of the region, and if we don't have a strong city core with strong leadership, our regional economy will suffer. Tonight, we are thrilled to host mayoral candidates Councilmember Angelique Ashby and Senator Darrell Steinberg. Prior to tonight, the candidates filled out a robust questionnaire compiled by our Metro PAC and participated in a similar forum in November. Questions will stem from the questionnaire, our previous forum, as well as from all of you, our guests, who submitted questions in advance. We are looking forward to a candid conversation to better understand the candidates' vision for Sacramento and our expanding business community. And with that, I'd like to introduce our Metro PAC Chair and former Metro Chamber Chair, Roy Brewer of Brewer Lofgren.
Good evening. Thank you, Peter. Good evening. Metro PAC is the political action committee of the Metro Chamber and its 1,700 business members. We are the advocacy arm of the Metro Chamber when it comes to endorsing candidates for public office. The PAC has been around for almost 30 years, and our mission is very straightforward. Create a business-friendly public policy environment, one that allows and encourages new businesses to locate to our community and allows existing businesses to expand and to thrive. If we are successful in those endeavors, the result will be more jobs in the community and a thriving and robust local economy. To create and sustain that business-friendly environment, we seek candidates for public office at the local, state, and national levels who will endorse public policies that create jobs and actively encourage that robust economy that we all seek. Our support for a candidate is a result of a careful, deliberative process. First, we send questionnaires to candidates. We then interview candidates face-to-face, and we engage in forums such as tonight. After we are confident that we have sufficient information available to us to make an informed decision, then we will entertain endorsing a candidate. And that brings us to our second forum, the one tonight. Our moderator tonight, as he was our moderator in November for the first forum, is Kevin Riggs, Senior Vice President at Randle Communications. Mr. Riggs is an Emmy-award winning reporter and political journalist who has covered campaigns for local, state, and national elections, including coverage of both the Democratic and GOP national conventions. During his 17-year tenure with KCRA Channel 3 here in Sacramento, he served as the anchor and as the lead for politics and the state capitol. So Kevin, I'm going to ask you again tonight to do what you did for us in November, and that is to explain the ground rules, if you will, for the forum, introduce the candidates, and begin the program.
All right.
Thanks.
Roy, thank you very much for that introduction. Thanks, of course, to all of you who are joining us both in the room as well as our audiences who are joining us online and on television. We all have our Powerball tickets tonight, right? And yet, here we all are, tending to business, which I think probably demonstrates a certain amount of wisdom. First of all, let me go ahead and welcome our two candidates on the stage. To my right, Angelique Ashby, who's been a member of the Sacramento City Council since 2010. And to my left, Darrell Steinberg, former President Pro Tem of the State Senate, also a former member of the Sacramento City Council. We're looking forward to hearing from both of you about your priorities and your ideas for the city of Sacramento. The ground rules for tonight's program are fairly straightforward. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for opening remarks. This is determined by coin flip in terms of the sequence. The questions will then alternate between the two candidates with a 1-minute rebuttal if deemed necessary, and then each candidate at the conclusion of the program will have 2 minutes to make their closing remarks. And again, these questions were among those submitted by members of the audience. I would also note that since both candidates have supporters here in the room, I would ask in terms of time management that beyond the initial applause after the opening remarks, that those here in the audience listen to the program quietly until its conclusion. Again, this is a time management issue. We have lots of issues to discuss and a certain amount of time to do it, so we wanted to make as efficient use of our time as possible. So with that, opening remarks, and again, determined by the coin toss, Darrell Steinberg, you're up.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Thank you to the Chamber. Thank you to Angelique. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm Darrell Steinberg. I served 6 years on the Sacramento City Council, 6 years in the State Assembly, and 8 years in the State Senate, the first president of the Senate from Sacramento in 125 years. For over a decade, I represented every neighborhood in Sacramento. I want to begin tonight by telling you two stories that I believe demonstrate my leadership. Both stories involve our community. One involved the most difficult chapter in modern state history. The other involved one of the most hopeful chapters in modern city history. The first story, of course, is when I became President Pro Tem of the Senate in 2009 and confronted a $42 billion budget deficit, unheard of in modern California history. I worked for 4 years as President of the Senate, employing all of my skill, which included negotiating, which included prodding, which included reasoning with the other side, which included a high degree of bipartisanship to help the state through that deficit. And though I certainly don't deserve all the credit for what occurred, I think it is fair to say that I was the last leader standing as the state went from a multi-billion-dollar budget deficit to a surplus and better times. The second story occurred in April of 2013 when Mayor Johnson asked me to take a red-eye to New York City on behalf of our city and meet with David Stern and convince him that even in blue California, I could pass a CEQA reform bill that would allow our economic catalyst, the downtown arena, to be built without delay. I convinced Commissioner Stern and the owners, and then came back to Sacramento. And despite the great discomfort of many of my colleagues, including the Speaker of the Assembly, I again used those same skill sets: persistence, negotiation, hard work, and ultimately my power on behalf of my city to pass that CEQA reform bill. And as you know, the beautiful arena is going forward. I intend to employ this same leadership for Sacramento when I become the next mayor. Whether it's riverfront development, whether it's balancing the budget, whether it's regional transit, whether it's homelessness, whether it's permit streamlining. I have the experience, I have the reach, and I have the consistent record of accomplishment to be a great mayor for the city. Sacramento's mayor should be its competitive advantage. I am that competitive advantage, and I look forward to our discussion tonight. Thank you.
Angelique?
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it very much. I'm Angelique Ashby, and as you heard, I'm currently on the Sacramento City Council and a candidate for mayor. I want to start by thanking you all for being here or watching from home. Thank you for giving us your evening. And in particular, thank you to the Chamber for hosting this series of events. It's been a tremendous opportunity to engage with the business community. Elections are about information, and the process should inform residents and business owners and help them to determine what they can expect to get from their next mayor. Tonight, I hope to continue the conversation with the business community in the room and engage the viewers watching from home. Tonight, I also hope to, and in the weeks to come and months to come, want to earn your support, earn your partnership, and most importantly, earn your vote. Sacramento stands on the precipice of an absolutely incredible future. We all know that. This city, undoubtedly, in the last few years, has taken a major turn. We have changed our trajectory, hopefully forever. And the feeling and energy that has come with that change is absolutely palpable and contagious. Everyone in this room, everyone, and many of the people watching have contributed to putting Sacramento squarely in this moment, in the moment that we're in right now. But what we do next will define us all. So will we continue with economic growth, with public and private partnerships, with development, with jobs, creation and incubation, with prioritizing public safety, or will we go back? Momentum is on our side. Momentum says we can and we should continue on this trajectory, push forward, move Sacramento into unprecedented successful years that we have earned ahead of us. In this moment, we have a choice to make. What kind of mayor do we want next? And my ask of the chamber is a simple one. Stay with me. Stay with me. You started this journey with me, and we've made incredible progress. Together, the city has irrefutably gone in the right direction, and it would be a mistake to go backwards. I look forward to earning your support and engaging in this process tonight. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you both. Let's start now with the questioning, and the first question, Darrell, will go to you, and this has to do with the issue of homelessness. Certainly, homelessness has become quite top of mind in recent weeks with homeless protests at the City Hall, I should say, and also talk about people saying that they should suspend the enforcement of the anti-camping ordinance at City Hall. My question, do you support the anti-camping ordinance and recent law enforcement activity? Secondly, what do you see first as the short term, second as the long-term solutions to deal with this problem, which is a problem we hear a lot from business owners?
Well, first of all, Kevin, homelessness is an encumbrance on our moral conscience. It's an encumbrance on our public safety, and it's an encumbrance on our economic development. And it is a city issue, and it must be a major priority of the next mayor. I support law enforcement because they're enforcing the law. And I would be okay with the anti-camping ordinance so long as it doesn't stand alone. For what is missing here is the capacity of our city, and frankly, we're not unique, it's cities throughout California, to be able to demonstrate and find permanent solutions to this problem. I like Sacramento steps forward and what they are doing to inventory people and to help get people into shelter. But you know what? Any given night in Sacramento, we have 2,600 homeless people and only emergency shelter for 600. So we need more emergency shelter, we need more transitional housing, and then to demonstrate why I make this point in this case that my reach makes me uniquely qualified to be the next mayor of this city, is I stood with the President of the Senate a week ago Monday and proposed, it was actually my idea, he proposed that we take 7% of the Prop 63 money, the initiative that I offered in 2004, bond against it statewide, and create a $2 billion fund for permanent supportive housing. That bill is going to pass this year, and that's my inspiration. And when it does pass, and I'm the mayor, Sacramento is going to be the leader in the state towards a housing-first policy. We know what works. It's intensive outreach, it's permanent housing, and it's services combined with that housing. And I will make that happen if I'm mayor.
Let me pose the question to you. Do you support the anti-camping ordinance? Do you support law enforcement, short-term, long-term solutions?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a great question. Homelessness is definitely an issue in the forefront right now, and if you don't believe me, visit City Hall on any given day, and you'll see it there, where we're having that debate, that discussion right now. And I'm glad that we're having that discussion because it's important to this city. Homelessness is an issue that happens in Sacramento because we don't have enough homes, right? We have a good program in place right now in Sacramento Steps Forward. It's only been in place about a year, but it is seeing tremendous results. It's a partnership, by the way, with the city and the county, because much of the services that are needed for the homeless population need to be provided by the county. The city does not provide mental health services. We don't do child welfare. We don't have social services. That's the job of the county. So it's a great partnership for us to be engaged in and for us to work on. And I actually applaud my opponent's efforts on bringing housing to the cities. That's great. But let's don't be confused. It doesn't replace the tool that we lost. We used to receive in the city and county of Sacramento on an annual basis, without competing, $50 to $75 million a year, 20% of which was mandated to go to housing. Between 2008 and the time that we lost that funding, we built over 2,000 homes for low and very low income shelter recipients in Sacramento. That was redevelopment. We lost redevelopment to the legislature under the leadership of my opponent. And while I would support the proposal in front of us now, it is one-time funds, and it is bond money, and it's 10,000 homes, which is great, but it's statewide, and there are 60,000 plus homeless people in Los Angeles alone, which is no doubt why the current President Pro Tem is supporting the initiative. So I don't think that the proposal replaces the most valuable tool that we had in recent years, but I do think that it could help Sacramento Steps Forward accomplish its ultimate goal.
Would you like to have a rebuttal on the redevelopment question?
Well, I sure would. And I think Angelique knows the story, and since she won't tell it, I will. The redevelopment cut was part of the $40+ billion state budget deficit. And at the state level, we were confronted with cutting either economic development and or health and welfare, health care for the poor and indigent, education, higher education. But here's the fact. We didn't eliminate redevelopment. We cut it in half, which was reasonable. The League of Cities then filed a lawsuit before the California Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, you want all or nothing, you get nothing. That was a city action. It was not a state action. And so I'll take responsibility for doing the prudent and right thing to cut redevelopment, because that was a necessary thing to do. We didn't eliminate redevelopment. And by the way, after that action, I authored the California Cap and Trade Investment Plan, which provides 10% of that funding for affordable housing on a base of $3 to $5 billion. So we're well on our way to replacing that.
We're going to leave it there for time. Before we leave the homeless issue, let me ask you a follow-up question. Darrell talked about the bill that Kevin DeLeon is carrying that he had been involved in developing, and this has to do with leveraging Prop 63 money to build housing for the homeless. What do you think of the idea of engaging in a solution on a statewide level like that as opposed to a purely local level?
Well, I think there are great benefits to working at a statewide level because there is funding that can be available. I just think it should be ongoing funding. I think that we had a terrific ongoing source. One thing about mayors, and in this state in particular, that is unique, is that the top 10 mayors, the 10 mayors of the largest cities, they meet regularly, and they do work on these initiatives, and they're almost as powerful as the legislators in that regard, and meet with the governor regularly. And I think most people know that I have served as vice mayor or mayor pro tem for the past 4 years straight. So I have stepped into this role many times of being mayor over the last 4 years that I've been here. And that is a unique opportunity that a mayor of a large city like Sacramento, and of course in the capital city, has, that does give us an opportunity to work on statewide issues, both with the legislature and with the other mayors across the state.
Did you want to address that question, the issue of a statewide solution versus purely local?
Well, we're not going to compare resumes here because our experiences are just vastly different. But I can tell you this, whether it's cap and trade dollars, whether it's homeless permanent housing dollars, whether it's career technical education dollars, another bill that I authored, I'm in a much better position to be able to deliver consistently, as I have, for my city. that distinguishes me from my opponent.
Next question has to do with commitment to this job that you're seeking. And let me start with you. Effective leadership often means carrying things through to their conclusion, but occasionally people in public life do see other opportunities and decide to pursue other opportunities. So my question with you, would you commit today that you will not campaign for, that you will not accept an appointment to another job in elective office should you be elected mayor of the city of Sacramento?
Well, unless it's Secretary of State or the United States Supreme Court, I will make that promise, of course. You know, I know that's a little buzz around that Darrell's using this, you know, as a stool to go. I could have run statewide. I could have chosen not to do this and run statewide. I deliberately chose to run for mayor of Sacramento. It's coming full circle for me. It's the city that I love. And the experiences that I have had and what I have done for my city makes this the job that I want. Angelique is right. We're on the cusp, the verge. People put it many, many different ways. I agree. We don't want to go backwards. We need to go forward. And so I make this choice with a happy heart and with a lot of enthusiasm. And so I'm not going to run for some other office midterm. Again, if that U.S. Supreme Court appointment comes, we'll have a conversation, but that's it. Okay, thank you.
Question to you.
I think it's pretty clear this isn't something I'm asked very often. I want to be your mayor. I want to be Sacramento's mayor. There isn't another job that I want. There isn't something else I would rather be doing. A better question is, how long can I have this job? I would love to serve Sacramento and see how much more we can accomplish together. I think one of the questions that is a fair question is the resume question. But ultimately, it's up to you. It's up to the voters whether or not you think time at the state level equates to experience at the local level. But for myself, I can tell you this. There is no person in the history of the city of Sacramento who has played a leadership role the duration of time that I have without becoming mayor. No one has ever served as vice mayor 2 years in a row. There's only even ever been 2 mayor pro tems in the city of Sacramento. I have held one of those 2 titles for 4 years. That means that my colleagues on the council who are selected by this city have chosen me every year to lead in their absence. If they're gone, the person they want to stand in for them is me. I'm humbled by that. I've enjoyed representing every single corner of this city. And over the last 5 years of my life, I've read books to little kids in Meadowview. I've run in every corner, it feels like. Just so you know, if you ever run for office, be prepared to do a lot of 5Ks. That is something they don't tell you, right? But I've helped solve problems in Oak Park and in Del Paso Heights with libraries, with school districts. Anybody who wanted to partner with the city who needed us, I wanted to be there. And that's why I'm running for mayor, because I think that we are a city that can stand together, united. And I don't think that state experience necessarily equates to love of your local leadership.
Okay. So this question of resume comes up, and first of all, I want to say, I think Angelique is a very good city council member. I think she's done a very good job. Not afraid to say that, even though she's my political opponent. She deserves that. But when she says that she was elected pro tem of the city council or mayor pro tem a couple of times, I think it's also important to point out that those same colleagues that are elected her to those positions, the majority are endorsing me for mayor of Sacramento. And as I said last time, I don't think that's a diss on you. I think that is a statement about how they view not just my state leadership, but my local leadership as well. I repeat what I said in my opening. I'm the only candidate up here who has represented every neighborhood of this city for over a decade in both of my legislative roles. And so I'm proud to have the endorsement of the majority of the council, the majority of the County Board of Supervisors. And I think that's going to make it much easier for me when I win to put together the coalitions of 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 that you need to assertively move forward city policy.
Okay, let's move
Kevin,
on.
I'd like to respond to that
Please,
just
go
for
ahead.
a moment, please. It's a fair assessment, but I didn't go to the city council to make friends, and I'm clearly not the establishment candidate in this race. I'm also the only woman on a 9-person body. So it's not too shocking that I don't have every endorsement in Sacramento. My colleague has been at this for 30 years. I do, however, though, have a pretty strong list of endorsers myself. And you think about this as you think about who you want to be your next mayor. Firefighters are standing with me. The police officers are standing with me. Assemblymember Jim Cooper is standing with me. Senator Dr. Richard Pan is standing with me. The Building Industry Association is standing with me. Susan Peters, County Supervisor, standing with me. Retired District Attorney Jan Scully, standing with me. I could go on. I am just as proud of my endorsements as my opponent is.
Okay, we're going to move on now to the issue of economic development, and I want to ask you, first of all, what would you do specifically as mayor to attract more jobs to the city of Sacramento? And are there certain types of businesses that you think deserve special consideration for coming in here? For example, should the city be a hub for a certain kind of industry?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, this is one of the most exciting things about where we sit right now in Sacramento. Literally where we sit geographically and at this moment in time. Because I have the reuse issue in my district with the arena, I have learned a lot working with GSAC, the Greater Sacramento Group, and many of our CEOs in this region about what we can recruit to our area, and we are prime to work with the Bay Area on recruiting tech industry here. We're also very good at food. We know that, right? We're good at eating, but we're good at food too. And the Farm to Fork movement and our agricultural roots here uniquely place us in a realm that not many other places actually in the world can aspire to be. We also are a healthcare mecca. We have a wonderful history here of providing medical services and being innovative on that front. Many of these things go together. Food, education, healthcare, and the sciences. And I think Sacramento is uniquely poised to pursue those innovation districts. We have set some systems in place that will help us create tools to recruit those businesses. But honestly, what Sacramento needs to do to recruit business is do a better job of telling our story. We have to sell ourselves better. This is something that you learn to do by selling yourself, by pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And in Sacramento, being a part of the council that I have been a part of for the last few years, I think the whole world has watched us do this. They've watched us recruit the likes of Vivek Ranadive and Mark Mastroff and others to not just come to Sacramento, but invest their dollars here. And we've all played a role in that. Sacramento comes together well when it needs to, but we're seeing investment like we've never seen before. Over 12 properties around the arena site downtown have already sold. And we have incredible development in the north area because of the moratorium lifting, and also for the first time in the south in Delta Shores. So it's a really incredibly exciting time for economic development in Sacramento.
Before I turn to Darrell, so in terms of the arena and with all of the economic renaissance downtown, are you saying the city doesn't need to work as hard to sell itself because of the economic growth that the arena itself represents?
No, I actually think just the opposite. I think that the arena creates an opportunity for us, really a window, a moment in time that we have to execute on this sort of palpable energy that I was talking about that exists in Sacramento. People are talking about us right now. They want to know, what's Sacramento going to do next? That's why we're both sitting up here, because we want to be a part of that. This is the opportunity. The next mayor gets to be the salesperson of Sacramento that recruits all those businesses here, that gets to work with us to build out that downtown to be what I know it can become. So I actually think the opposite. I think we have a marketable opportunity to capture in our midst.
Darrell?
Thank you. 5 ideas. Number 1, with the same intensity and energy that this city spent on the arena, which I think was a great thing, we need to develop the riverfront in Sacramento. It is a wasted opportunity. We're at the confluence of 2 rivers, the riverfront should be our main street, 12 million visitors a month, and it lays without any real prospect for economic development, at least on the Sacramento side. I'm going to make that a focus. Number two, we need to expand the convention center and fix the community center theater, because I think we are underutilizing our potential as a tourist destination around arts and entertainment. Food is our great draw, I agree, but we can do a whole lot more to make Sacramento a destination city. And then 3 specific economic development ideas that I want to share with you that I would look forward to leading on if I become mayor. Number 1, we need to make sure that our city budget is in sufficient balance that we can afford tax credits for manufacturing and technology companies that agree to come to Sacramento and agree to stay at least 10 years, number 1. Number 2, I've talked to the region builders and the region restaurateurs and the De Veers and the Sellens and the Dos Coyotes and all the people who are doing this incredible restaurant renaissance in Sacramento. And I propose tonight that if a restaurant that has one place and one building seeks to build a second restaurant or second building, that we provide zero interest loans to those restaurants so that they stay in Sacramento and grow in Sacramento. And number 3, I propose that if any employer is creating 25 jobs or more directly, not indirectly, that we commit as a matter of city policy to a 90-day permitting process, a 90-day permitting process. I hear the stories about the difficulty of knowing what kind of fees are owed. It takes too long oftentimes to get through the permitting process. So I put forward those 3 specific ideas to continue our economic renaissance, not just in the downtown, but throughout other struggling corridors and all neighborhoods in Sacramento.
And I did ask Angelique this, I'll ask you. In terms of the arena, what kind of a jumpstart, what kind of a dynamic do you think it represents in terms of what you're talking about?
Well, again, I'm still tired from that red eye, Kevin. You know, I think the arena was a terrific thing. But I think if it is seen as an end in and of itself, then we are losing a great opportunity. If it's seen as a beginning, if we spread that kind of energy to other business corridors in the city, if we continue the downtown renaissance, if we look at where our culture isn't what it should be around economic development and business development and change our policies accordingly, we will look at the arena as the great catalyst that led to so much more.
Continuing on the theme of job growth and economic development, there has been a lot of discussion, a lot of meetings in Sacramento dealing with promotion and entrepreneurship, promotion of entrepreneurship as a key to Sacramento's future. What role as mayor would you want to play in that process, in encouraging that?
Well, first of all, this is becoming a young person's city. And I think that is great. I mean, the test for us, right, is whether or not our kids, once they hopefully graduate college and maybe out of Sacramento, choose to come back and choose to make their living here. The Downtown Housing Initiative is a great goal and a great start, and I know we're well on our way. But that housing needs to be matched with high-wage jobs. Because if we do not diversify our economy here in Sacramento and maintain our status as a government town, people are not going to be able to have the economic means to be able to live in our downtown, and they're going to choose somewhere else. And so we need to foster this incredible energy. And we need to do so by being consistent in the way we vote. And here is another difference I would like to point out with my opponent. Infill is very important. Sacramento is infill. I authored SB 375, the state bill that encourages infill and says future transportation dollars are only going to go to projects which represent infill. On 3 major projects during Angelique's tenure, the Sacramento Commons project, McKinley Village, and the CSU housing project, 2,000 units of housing, plus a 300 person hotel in the Commons project, she voted against those projects. On 2 out of the 3, she was the only no vote. They were 7-1 or 8-1 votes. I would have voted for those projects because I think we need to vote for projects which are consistent with what we say we want. More housing, more energy downtown, more energy in our neighborhoods, and that's a difference.
Please.
I'd like to answer the question, but then I'd also like an opportunity to speak to the other issue. So, first of all, entrepreneurship is the spirit of the West, right? California is the state of innovators and dreamers, and I'm looking out at my local chamber president right there and thinking about all of the businesses that we have worked together to recruit to Natomas. And there are some people like her, by the way, in Sacramento who make us shine, who recruit dreamers. Come in all ages and shapes and sizes, and she happens to be a regional coordinator to recruit veterans to the area, and we have some amazing veteran businesses. I think the role of the city is to partner with people like her who are working so hard to recruit those businesses here. And then when they get here, we have to help them succeed. Another face I'm looking at in the crowd is my own business partner, my dad, a retired vet. He doesn't live in Sacramento, he lives in Davis, but guess where he wanted to open his business? In Sacramento, right? And we've owned that business here for many years. Being a business owner means taking risk every day. I've lived that life, and so have most of you in this room and probably many people watching at home. It's just different. You view life differently when you hire employees and you're responsible for signing their checks. When you know that somebody else's mortgage, somebody else's childcare payment, somebody else's grocery shopping is reliant on your ability to make payroll, and that means you need to be the best businesswoman or man that you can be. That changes you, and it changes your perspective in how you run a city like Sacramento. It makes you want to help small businesses. That's why I started this day talking about incubators. We have 2 tremendous universities in our district, in Sac State and UC Davis. We also have small universities that are incredible, like Cordon Bleu Cooking School and UTI, that help us take that entrepreneurial spirit in people of all ages, lifelong learners, and help them advance their dreams and careers. And is there anything more important that a city can do than help you achieve your dreams? And Kevin, if I could respond to the other issue.
I want you to respond to the questions raised by Darrell about your votes on the infill project.
Yes, thank you very much. Let's talk about the CSUS housing project. I absolutely was the only no vote. And I'm gonna put this in the category of sometimes being a mom counts. A group came forward and they said, we'd like to build student housing over by Sac State. For the record, I have a son at Sac State. He's 20 years old. He's my oldest boy. I was a single mom when I had him, raised him for the first 6 years by myself before I was able to get married and buy a home and settle in. This housing group had a theme. Their theme is a red Solo cup. In fact, when they went to the New York Stock Exchange, they had a person dressed up as a red Solo cup ring the bell. They have 2 events every year. One is a red Solo cup drinking event, and the other one is called Cupcakes and Condoms. They proudly market themselves as a place to have sex and drink alcohol. I thought it was inappropriate and ridiculous, so I voted no. The rest of the council did vote yes. I will say this, that project failed, they ran out of money, and it didn't come through. I think it was the right decision on my part.
Please.
Well, of course, there are 2 other projects that amount to, again, over 1,000 units. In fact, the majority were the 2 McKinley Village and the Commons. That's not the only thing, or the 3 projects. You also voted in 2013, just a couple of years ago, and was the only no vote against what the Sacramento Bee called the most extensive rewrite and reform of Sacramento zoning laws in 15 years. Estimated to reduce cost and timing to get through the permitting process by 30%. That was a 7-1 vote. Now again, if we're talking about trying to spur the economic engine, if we're talking about trying to foster entrepreneurial energy, if we're talking about the arena being just a catalyst but not the end, then we need to have policies that streamline our permitting and zoning processes. And I would have voted for that had I been on the city council and had I been mayor. And the city is not just Natomas. The city is a whole host of other neighborhoods, and I know you know that, and I also know you've been supportive of a lot of projects in other neighborhoods. But I think if these projects, Sac Commons and McKinley Village, had been in the Natomas district, you might have looked at them differently. But there are needs throughout the entire city, and especially if we're serious about infill, we need to make sure that we are building housing in these other places. And I think it's important to point out the difference.
I'm going to let you address that.
Thank you. Well, the other two projects had one thing in common. They were both incomplete in their funding mechanisms, and so I voted no on them. I don't like half-done projects, and I don't like it when people come to us with a partial plan. They were good projects, but if I believed that they could be fully funded and built to completion, I would have supported them. But I did not think they could, and both remain to be seen. However, I will say this, once they're voted on, I'm happy to support them. And one of those projects required SACOG assistance. And as soon as the council voted to support it, I took up the torch of supporting them at SACOG and trying to make sure that we were right. I'd love to prove myself wrong in both of those instances. I think that those could be good projects if we find the funding and the developers are able to bring that forward. The other issue that you mentioned there about Natomas is, you know, on the council, when you sit at the council, dozens and dozens and dozens of projects come. Those of you that are in here that do development know, probably are thinking to yourself, she only voted no on 3? That's pretty good. Because there are a lot that come through the city of Sacramento. You know why? Because we're a land use entity, that's what we do. As for the package that I voted against one key critical component. It removed the call-up bill, which means if you live in a community and you don't like a project and it's already been approved by the Planning Commission and you come to your council member and say, I don't like that project, I have to say to you, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do about it because it removed the call-up. I don't think that's a council member's job. I think it's a council member's job to represent their community. And as mayor, I would want that same authority, the ability to represent the people over the developers if that were necessary.
Okay, we're going to move on. Let me ask you now, what do you think about the idea of supporting a mandate for the use of project labor agreements on public projects in Sacramento? Is that a good idea or not?
Yeah, I think project labor agreements, and most labor unions think would agree, is a gold standard for the labor unions and for making sure that projects are union driven. We have examples of where that's worked really well in Sacramento. The arena is probably the most relevant example. But there are also times that a project labor agreement does not work. And there are some projects that will never come to fruition if project labor agreements are mandatory. So I do not support a citywide project labor agreement. And I think that needs to be handled on a case-by-case basis.
Darrell?
Yeah, I also believe that project labor agreements can be a useful tool to bring labor and management and the developer together. It creates a significant amount of certainty. But like Angelique, I also believe, certainly when it comes to private development, that they should be looked at on a case-by-case basis. There's some talk and work in Stockton about a citywide policy for project labor agreements for public works projects. And I'd be open to that discussion, but not a citywide policy for project labor agreements for all private developments. They need to be taken on a case-by-case basis.
Speaking of labor and wages, do you support labor efforts to pass a statewide $15 minimum wage across the state? What are the implications for Sacramento, given the fact that it recently passed its own minimum wage ordinance?
Well, as I said the last time, I recognize that I'm before a Chamber of Commerce audience here, and I think I know what the popular answer might be. But I'm always going to tell you exactly where I stand. I support a statewide increase in the minimum wage to $15. I think it is fair. I also think it puts more purchasing power in the hands of working people so that they can eat in our restaurants and shop in our stores and contribute to the economy. I will also say that a minimum wage increase, just like the arena, cannot be the end, but only one means to the end. The real end being creating a diverse economy, a private sector economy in Sacramento, that on the natural pays working people more than $15 an hour. And that needs to be the first job of the next mayor of Sacramento. On the local minimum wage effort, I do not believe that is the way to go. I've talked to, again, the DeVeres and the other restaurateurs, and to apply that just to the city of Sacramento and not other cities or counties within the larger region obviously puts the city at a competitive disadvantage. That's where I stand.
But does it make sense to have a one-size-fits-all $15 minimum wage in a city like Sacramento, where costs are less than a city like Los Angeles?
I know that it is imperfect for the reason that you just stated, but I think in Sacramento, our business community will be able to adjust to it much better and benefit a lot of working people, by the way, if it is a statewide policy, because then they won't be at a disadvantage when it comes to the neighboring jurisdictions within, outside of our city and within our region.
Angelique, what do you think? Statewide initiative?
Yeah, I've been consistent on this issue. This is a statewide problem. It has to be resolved at the state level. Otherwise, we put ourselves at an economic disadvantage. My opponent has stated that he would have supported the ordinance that my colleagues passed that increased the minimum wage here, and this is the first time I've heard him say that he would not support the local ordinance, but I agree with the statements that you made today. It's a statewide issue. You can't put yourself at an economic disadvantage. It just doesn't work, especially in a city like Sacramento where West Sac is so close and you know, we're just so adjacent. We're not a city that's an island. We're right in the middle. We are the center of an urban core, and we just need to protect that. I would say that I think as the statewide discussion happens, I hope a few things will happen at the statewide level. I hope that they will look at what $15 means in Red Bluff versus San Francisco versus the Inland Empire and around the state, because it will be different. And I hope that the chambers will engage in those conversations and talk about those cluster models and identifying regions with commonality. And then, you know, the second thing that I think for Sacramento that I worry about is our restaurant scene. The restaurant owners have been really clear that they're deeply concerned about what that type of wage increase would do to them, as are the local governments. In fact, Jerry Brown said last week that too much, too fast would cause a lot of problems to the government entities that are also going to be held to those wage standards. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done on this issue. I think it needs to be decided at the state level by voters, but there's still some planning that I think needs to go into that.
So to be clear, it's a statewide issue in your mind, but what about the idea of the $15? Are you okay with that $15 figure? Is that a magic number for you?
No, $15 is not a magic number for me. I'm far more interested in what each community needs. What $15 means to San Francisco may not be enough, but what $15 means to Redding or to Sacramento or to West Sacramento is completely different. So for me, there's not a magic number. I think you should be, you know, if you're going to implement a minimum wage increase, it needs to be about more than an arbitrary number.
I'm not sure that we can have it together both ways, because the state is not going to pass a law, and certainly there's not going to be an initiative which differentiates between every geography of the state. And so if that's what you believe, which I think is a reasonable position, then it's important, I think, that you state that you're then for the city making a decision or the region making the decision, because otherwise the state's not going to do that. The state is going to put forward a $15 an hour minimum wage. I said I'm for it. I know that may not be popular here, because I don't want every city and every county making those decisions. I think it should be statewide policy, but the state's not going to differentiate in the way that you suggest. And so either want statewide policy that is going to be across the board, or you want to leave it to the locals to make their city by city or county by county decisions.
So he's saying you're inconsistent, statewide or regional decision making.
Yeah, I hear him, but I don't agree. I don't see the difficulty. You know, the state does this all the time. Different groups get different rates for foster care. It depends on what level of care you are. You get a different amount of money for mental health services. You, 10 minutes ago, proposed that $10,000 be split statewide in one way or another. I think the state is very capable of figuring out what $15 an hour would mean in one area versus another area. And I don't think I'm alone in my position here. It's very similar to what the governor said. So I just disagree with his analysis.
Okay, let's move on to public transit. What grade would you give our local public transit system and why? And what would you do as mayor to improve it?
Well, I have young kids now, and so you know what they do when, and I'm looking at a school board member, when you're not doing well, but we still want to encourage you to improve. Rather than giving you a really bad grade, we just say needs improvement. So I think I'll go with a solid NI on needs improvement in our regional transit, because I clearly think that's where we are. I think there's some 12 entities that do transportation come into our urban core, and they're not coordinated right now. And I've been on SACOG for a while, and there's been this conversation about a Connect car, but hasn't quite gotten there. And regional transit is sort of like an amenity, but it's not. Some people want it, some people don't. It's underutilized. It's not as efficient as it could be and should be. It doesn't go to the airport. It doesn't cross the river. It doesn't go to Elk Grove. We didn't pass streetcar. We need an urban circulator. There's a lot of room for improvement on transit. I hope the business community will set this as a priority in the year to come and engage. As mayor, I certainly would. I spent 1 year on the regional transit board, and I didn't see it going anywhere very quickly. It's pretty tough. But I will tell you, there are examples of transportation working well in our city. There are smaller transportation management associations and things like paratransit that actually do a really good job. But how they integrate in with a larger system is where we could stand to improve. And another pet peeve of mine with our transit system is that funding always seems to be allocated by your point of origin, meaning a lot of homes equals a stop. But in great cities, when you go to great cities that have public transit systems, you don't get off the line at so-and-so's house. You go to a destination. And these transit lines stop at arenas and museums and large parks and shopping centers, and it's point of destination driven. And a lot of times in Sacramento, based on alignment, I think we miss the mark on this. We don't go through corridors that are driven by jobs that people would be going to, large employer places. So if you know people, and some of you out there I know do, who are reliant on public transportation, they're probably more likely to be using Uber right now than they are to be using our city's transit system. We need to flip that around.
So you've been talking about routing deficiencies, but what about the issue of crime and public safety? Has RT done enough to address that?
Oh no, absolutely not. That's evident. It's on the front page of the Bee all the time. It's something we definitely need to work on. One of the problems too with our system is that the pay is an honor system, so we don't have a check. We don't have a person on every single train. And I know that the folks that are there now wish that the earlier decision makers would have done that a little bit differently. None of us were around when that decision was made. And I think we all probably would do that differently now. But public safety, it has to be the number one thing. Nobody's going to ride public transportation if they don't feel safe doing it. So we have to fix that. We have to improve it. There's more that can be done.
What grade would you
My
give?
grade, NDI, needs dramatic improvement. It's a mess. It is a mess, and we ought to be aspiring to light rail to the airport. And we ought to be aspiring to grander and bigger visions, but we have to start with the basics here. It is perceived, and in some ways perception is reality, to not be safe, to not be clean. It doesn't allow for convenience for the customer to be able to get a free transfer, for example, from light rail to bus and vice versa. And then when you think about trying to, again, foster this entrepreneurial energy and the 10,000 housing units downtown, transit is an economic driver. This is not just a convenience or, an amenity. It's an economic driver. Our infill policies, our downtown housing initiative will only work if we dramatically improve our transit system. And once we clean it up, and once we provide more convenience, and once we change the perception, then we need to make it easy for people to use their debit card to be able to buy their transit ticket. How about Wi-Fi on the cars? How about a coffee car? How about focusing some economic development attention on station development so that the stations themselves are attractive? This is an area where the business community, I know, is already taking a significant leadership profile. And I will encourage that, and I will encourage everybody in this community, including the next mayor, and I hope it's me, to make improving our transit system as an economic driver and for accessibility a major city priority.
There is ongoing concern, as you know, that the city's growing pension costs are starving city services. How would you address the public pension debt and the growth in that debt?
Well, first of all, I believe in a defined benefit pension. I believe we ought to provide retirement security for our public workers, including our public safety officers. They make great sacrifices for us. And I think a reasonable, defined pension is the right way to go. Having said that, I confronted this again in 2011 when Jerry Brown became governor. Under the old law, local governments could negotiate contracts that would allow their public safety unions and their non-public safety unions to contribute zero to their pensions. And so once again, I pushed my colleagues, many of whom were uncomfortable, to engage in this debate and discussion. And we passed comprehensive pension reform in the Senate that was not just for state workers, but also said at the local level, that all employees have to contribute at least 50% of their pension. And we also increased the retirement age for new workers and lowered retirement formulas, not with any glee, but out of necessity. The city's problems are real. And I believe, for a variety of reasons, including the fact that I'm not endorsed by police and fire, that I'm in a better position to be able to have those honest discussions and to address long-term pension liability and also long-term health care costs for retirees. We have to. It's the easiest thing in the world to kick down the road because it doesn't affect the budget in year one. But in year 4 or 5, and certainly if we want to leave a legacy for the next generation of leaders and people who live in this city, we have got to have honest discussions. The police and fire budget's 80% of the net budget. We can't afford not to.
Would you feel the same way if you had gotten the endorsements of the police and fire unions?
Look it. That's a great question. Of course I would feel the same way. The same way I was supported by police and fire in the state Senate consistently, and yet I still, as the leader of the Senate, worked with Governor Brown and the Assembly to pass the comprehensive pension reform that I just talked about. Look at, sometimes in politics, you have to have difficult conversations with your friends. I say the mark of a good leader is one who is willing to look their best friend or their best supporter in the eye and say, on this one, we disagree. Now, I will fight to maintain the sanctity of defined benefit pensions. But we need to have some real conversations like we did at the state level with our local union leaders, and we need to make sure that we don't perpetuate and continue this long-term debt.
Same question to you. How would you address the growing pension debt?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm never going to apologize for having the endorsement of the firefighters or the police officers. They're heroes. They put their life on the line for us every day. It's a different kind of job. We all know that. We all treat them special. Does that mean that I can't work with them on pension reform? You just explained that you did when you had their endorsement in the state Senate. You just don't have it now. I do. And one of the reasons I do is because I have on many occasions looked them in the eye and told them, I think you're wrong. And they know that. Some of them are sitting in the room. As a result of that relationship, by the way, we built a relationship of trust between the police officers and the firefighters, myself. And by the way, those aren't the only public unions in the city, so there are others. And but what they need is a partner who helps them. What happens in the city is there's a finance department, and they come out with all these numbers, and they say there's this impending fiscal cliff and unfunded liability. First of all, unfunded liability is a term that we all live with. Anybody have a mortgage? Anybody? Okay, then you have unfunded liability in your life, unless you also have the same amount of money as your mortgage sitting in a bank account somewhere just in case your bank calls you tomorrow and says it's due. That's what unfunded liability means. What matters is that we can make the payment and that we can work with those partners to reduce that payment over time. This didn't happen overnight. It's not like the pension issue became all of a sudden in 5 years. Oh my gosh, we gave away the farm. That didn't happen. You were on the council in the 90s, so you know. This happened over a long, long period of time, and we have to address it. In the last few years, I've been the one person who would look them in the eye and say, okay, what do you want to do? And together, we've been able to present real solutions. For the first time ever, the firefighters agreed to contribute largely to their post-retiree health benefits. They changed ages. The police officers did the same thing. They made major changes in their last contract revisions. And I would argue the only person on the city council or running for mayor that could look them in the eye and talk to them realistically about this problem is me.
And you believe that the defined benefit system should continue?
I think that we need to work together with the unions about how we modify that system all across the board. They have large groups, and Senator Steinberg knows this. They have statewide efforts to bring forward really good plans. So for example, this retiree healthcare trust fund that they put together was their own idea. It was an idea born of state fire that they brought to us that others are adopting all across the country. So I wouldn't be so quick to agree. I would be more open to conversation about there are a variety of ways that we can address this issue moving forward.
Anything you want to add? Okay.
Only that there are going to be some very difficult decisions ahead. And you have to be able to sometimes say to your friends, no, and not just privately, but when you're around the dais and you have to cast a hard public vote that your friends don't like.
Kevin, just really quick to that point. I've been on the council for 5 years. Think about what the last 5 years has been like. I've made many, many hard decisions. In fact, my second year on the council, I went to a ceremony where we collected 100 badges back from police officers that we had to let go. You know how hard that was? And the next year, guess what? We did it again. So I think I am very intimately, unfortunately, familiar with making difficult decisions with my friends. Thank you.
We talked earlier about the arena, and one of the interesting things that's going on now is the excess revenue from the arena bonds. And so my question, would you support the idea of using those excess funds to go to pension debt? Should it go to more of a rainy day or emergency reserve? Or is there another priority that you would identify to use that money for?
Yeah, first of all, how great is that? How great is that that's the position we're in? It's such a wonderful place to be in, that the arena turned out in so many ways to be such a positive. And by the way, a lot of people worked on the arena deal, but this portion, all the credit goes to one guy, and his name's Russ Fair. He's the city treasurer for Sacramento. He's amazing, and he put together an incredible bond package that just knocked an absolute home run for Sacramento, and I'm really proud of it. So great to be in that position. From a development perspective, on the city side of the house, I do think there is a priority, and it is the community theater. We have outstanding litigation on the theater that shows that it's not compliant with ADA standards, and really there's a lot that can be done there. It is a tandem to the convention center, so there's an opportunity there. And I think from a development standpoint of city-owned projects, that to me would be the next priority. But yes, there could certainly be a discussion, and should be a discussion, not just of a mayor, but of the whole full council, with the input, of course, from the finance department and the treasurer, about where we could get the most bang for our buck. One thing the city does a great job with is identifying how we can allocate dollars and then turn it into more dollars and double up. So there's a way probably that we could take those excess dollars and use them in more than one capacity to serve Sacramento. But I'm honestly just so glad that we're in that spot. It's exciting to be able to make those kinds of decisions. And yes, towards pension, sure. Towards a theater renovation would be great. Towards more economic development in the region, also great.
How significant is that revenue stream?
It's pretty incredible. I mean, the amount of savings, first of all, on what we thought we were going to have to spend has been tremendous. And it's actually gone down twice since we went out to market. So maybe it'll do it for us again, and we'll get another boost.
All right. Darrell?
When we finally had a state surplus in 2013, I proposed, and essentially the legislature adopted, a third approach. Put a third into debt repayment, put a third into rainy day fund, and put a third into investment, i.e. spending, especially to make up for some of the terrible cuts that were made during the recession. And I would apply the same kind of approach to any city windfall or surplus here. I would put some of it into a rainy day fund or into the pay down of debt. I would certainly put some of it into the investment side. And on the investment side, I think we need to make up for our shortfall in police officers. I also think we need to invest more in parks and youth. So I would, and that would be the second category. First category, debt repayment rainy day fund. 2, cops and parks. And third, the thing that I would, excuse me, the third thing that I would want to do is put that last third into an economic development fund to do the kinds of things that I had talked about earlier, either the zero interest loans for the second restaurant, or the economic incentive, the tax credit for the manufacturer technology company that comes into Sacramento and commits to staying at least 10 years. So I would take any surplus and I would have a very logical approach that I would propose to the city council on how to spend that was smart, but at the same time invested in more of what we need.
Kevin, can I just add one thing to that? You have to be careful with these kinds of funds because they're linked to particular rules on spending them. For example, if the dollars are related back to the parking revenues or the money that we got from those bonds, you actually couldn't use it for some of the things that have been stated. Also, you have to be really careful when you have a surplus in the city and it's one-time funds, like a savings, not to use it for service. I would not use it to hire police officers because you wouldn't have the same money next year, so you'd have to let them go again. If you could use it for maybe a couple years, still, you'd have to find money 2 years down the road. So if you're going to use the money for an ongoing component, you need to make sure that it is an ongoing funding source or a replaceable funding source in a short term. But the other two categories of an economic reserve or development or economic development are good categories, but also generally the city does best using these dollars to invest in ourselves, in our own projects, in the things that need to happen in the city, like the theater.
Were you talking about ongoing expenses?
Well, I was giving a more general answer of how I would use surplus dollars. If we're talking about this particular source, which are excess bond funds, and I think Angelique is correct. You use one-time money for one-time needs. And so for this particular fund, I would invest in 2 out of the 3 that I talked about. If there's a surplus dollar from the general fund, I would categorize it by thirds in the way that I described earlier.
We talked earlier in this program about the issue of affordable housing, but it was in the context of the homeless issue. In a broader context, what would you do as mayor to spur the development of more affordable housing, both market rate as well as affordable, while also helping to protect current residents, especially young professionals, from getting priced out? What are your ideas?
Well, in part it's a supply and demand issue. I mean, we are at, a couple thousand units with a goal of 10,000 or more. And so I think as the supply increases, my hope under the basic laws of supply and demand is that is going to bring some price moderation. But we can't just wait for the laws of supply and demand because sometimes the market doesn't work exactly the way that we want. And we do have an ordinance in the city that requires for each market rate project or commercial project for money to be set aside for affordable and workforce housing. And I think we need to, again, galvanize that and make sure that we are providing all the necessary and appropriate subsidies so that there is a mix of housing for people in our community. Then the third thing I want to go back to, affordability is in part determined by the kind of job that somebody holds. Somebody who holds a bare minimum wage job or even a little better is not going to be able to afford any range of housing in the downtown or much anywhere else. And so the number one job of a mayor, especially a mayor of this emerging city, is to stoke the economic engine, to enhance our relationships with UC Davis and Sac State, to see our competitive advantage with the Bay Area, and to rally and bring more private sector jobs to this community. That will help make housing more affordable as well.
What about the rental market? Would you support capping rents or capping annual increases? What would you do?
I'm not a believer in strict rent control. I just don't think it works. I think it tends to shrink the supply. And so I think we need to continue working on the supply. And we need to use all of the incentive tools at our disposal, whether it's drawing down more state cap and trade housing dollars, whether it's the city's own ordinance on affordable housing, to try to make more units affordable to more people. I would add, if I have just 20 seconds here, one of the great benefits of the mental health bond that we talked about earlier is that that $2 billion bond can be leveraged about 4 or 5 to 1. And the idea is not to have people with mental illness living segregated in the community, but actually to use those leverage dollars, tax credits, other federal state funds, private equity, to build integrated housing that includes workforce housing. And so there are a lot of opportunities, if we're creative, to deal with this crisis, but it's certainly something that we need to be cognizant of and make sure that we have as many affordable units as possible for people.
Affordable housing?
Yeah, so first of all, I think when Mr. Steinberg said there are 10,000 homes, those are not 10,000 low-income homes. There is an initiative to build 10,000 homes downtown in the next 10 years, and I think what he's referencing is we're going to blow that out of the water. It looks like we're going to get to more like 13 or 14,000 homes downtown in those 10 years, which is exciting for Sacramento. Some of them will be low-income homes. Some of those are going to be very high-end homes, move-up housing. I think the question is, how do we hit the affordable component in between? To be really honest with you, in downtown, this is going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge of the next mayor. The next mayor is going to have to make sure that that initiative, which, by the way, it is only an initiative right now. It's not a policy. It hasn't been adopted. It's not formal. It's been voted on in its principle, but it has not been codified by the city. So when it does, we need to have a conversation, and we need to work together, the business community, the housing advocates, our partners in the community, our partners in the region, to look at exactly how are we going to ensure a full spectrum of housing in our downtown. And then I'm glad you brought up the housing ordinance. I led that ordinance development, so I'm glad that you like it. I think it works well too. It's a major modification. My partners in rewriting that ordinance were the Building Industry Authority, the housing community. There are some people here, I see Tammy Dramer in the back, who met with me, pushed hard on that issue. The region business and other folks that have an interest in how we do this moving forward. Look, at a different time in my life, I lived in low-income inclusionary housing in the city of Sacramento. As a single mom, I used food stamps, I used subsidized childcare, I was putting myself through UC Davis and then later McGeorge School of Law. It's really important to have that kind of housing option for people who are pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and putting themselves in a better place. I, by the way, during that time, lived in Natomas. So this isn't just a downtown issue. This is a city of Sacramento issue. I do think we lost our biggest tool in redevelopment, but there are still opportunities to partner and continue to work on this issue, and I think the new ordinance sets us on the right track. It does tell us that when you're doing a market rate project that you have to set aside money into the city's housing trust fund, and then we're able to use that money on projects across the city wherever is most appropriate so that one community doesn't become overburdened or over-concentrated with housing that they can't take care of. Out in the new development areas on both ends, there is a lot of low-income housing, and there are missing amenities, no light rail. We talked about that earlier, right? Public transportation is completely absent, devoid from that discussion. So it's one thing in theory to write a policy that says, hey, we're going to put housing on transit lines. But if it's not happening because the development isn't happening on the transit lines, then it's really just a policy that hasn't been implemented. So there's room for improvement here.
First of all, I asked Darrell about rent control, so I'll ask you, what's your position?
Yeah, rent control is a drastic measure, and we're nowhere near there. I would not support that.
You had something?
I only want to say that government plays a crucial role here, whether it's housing trust funds, whether it's drawing down state dollars. But again, there's a lot of entrepreneurial energy going on in the private sector that is contributing to this housing renaissance. Now, it's not quite affordable housing the way we think about it, but I look at the Mill on Broadway, which is arguably at the outskirts of downtown, depending on how you define the downtown. And here they are building housing beginning at about $200,000 home ownership. Now, that isn't within the reach of everyone, but it's certainly a step in the right direction in terms of work and family. So I think this is another issue where the private sector and the public sector need to recognize there must be affordability in all parts of the city, including the downtown. And together, let's be creative, let's pool the resources, and let's help as many people as possible.
By some projections, Angelique, to get our water, our sewer, our storm drains up to necessary levels, the city may need to impose double-digit, multi-year rate increases. Would you oppose those increases? Why or why not?
Yeah. I am the chair of our water ad hoc in the city of Sacramento, and I've worked with a couple different teams of council members since I've been there, everyone from Rob Fong through now Rick Jennings and a variety of folks in between. And here's what we learned. This was incredible. There have not been significant investments made to our infrastructure system in 100 years. That's why our city manager always says, I'd like to see an investment more than once every 100 years in our sewer system and water and treatment facilities. So that's a problem for us. We may have to take a bigger hit than we wanted to take right now because previous councils didn't do anything. And so up until about 3 years ago, there were no investments. So unfortunately, the council that I sit on, which luckily is a brave council full of brave souls, will probably have to take a rate hike on this issue. We do have a rate advisory board, though. It won't be determined by the council. The rate advisory board will make a recommendation to us, and we'll hear it out. But yep, there are woeful inadequacies in our infrastructure in the city of Sacramento.
Well, as I understand it, the rate advisory board makes, as you said, makes a recommendation to the council, but ultimately the council has to make these difficult decisions. And I'm sure you will, and if I were on the council or a mayor, I would carefully scrutinize the rate increases, because I think the goal is always to try to fund needed infrastructure, but to do so in a way that does not create rate shock. And I know, for example, on the proposed water fee increases, one of the rationales for the large increase is to speed up the state law that requires the city of Sacramento to have water meters in every home. And that, may not be popular, but that was a necessary move, especially in this era of drought. And we do have to measure and conserve. And so the council is going to have to balance that very carefully. Given the drought, given climate change, is it worth the high increase in order to expedite the building of water meters? I would say, again, I'm not going to be sitting there in judgment. It comes up this year. But I would carefully scrutinize it, and I would do all I could to avoid rate shock.
We're getting down to the last portion of the program. So Darrell, let me ask you, how would you describe the biggest difference between you and your opponent here on the stage? How would you define that?
Well, one of the ironies of this race, of course, is that if I win, Angelique's going to be my colleague. And so I think highly of her. I think she's energetic and she's smart, and she's brought a lot to Natomas in the city. But I don't think there's any comparison in terms of experience, reach, and consistently delivering big results, not just for the state, but for the city. Look, leadership is energy, vision, and wisdom. And I have demonstrated throughout my entire public service career, which has not always been easy. Someone once said to me, you don't pick your time picks you. And Lord, they sure picked me to lead the Senate at an auspicious time. But I have delivered. And I have the ability to work with state and national leaders. I'm endorsed by Congresswoman Doris Matsui. I'm very proud of that. To bring a whole lot more, I think, to this city than Angelique can at this time. And so it'll be up to the voters to decide.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, I think big experience and big results is relative. And if you're looking for somebody to pass big statewide legislation for you, I'm not your girl. But if you want to reduce your crime rate, like we have done in Natomas by, say, 48% in my first term, then you should vote for me. Do you live in an area where crime is important to you, where you want to be closer to emergency medical services? Because I've improved emergency medical response time by more than 3 minutes. It means every person that lives in my district, thanks to my relationship with the police officers and our fight together and the firefighters, is closer to emergency medical services than they ever were before. Do you want a person who does economic development? Because thanks to the relationship that we've built with the chamber, our numbers in Natomas have never gone down. We've gone up every year in jobs. I've built 53 acres of parks with $23 million. I never touched the general fund. So I think that results are relative. And I can't tell you what I have done as a senator, because I'm not a senator. I'm a council member. I was elected to represent my district. And I think it's ironic. When I was president of a neighborhood association, people said, she only cares about Creekside. And then I became this leader for North Natomas, and there's some people in the room who know this story. And they'd say, she only cares about North Natomas. And then I represented all of Natomas, and then people said, she only cares about all of Natomas. Let me assure you, the next thing that I believe will come out of people's mouths is, she only cares about Sacramento. Darn it, right? Let me do that for us. Let me address it.
We are getting short on time, so let me go ahead and go to the closing remarks. And Darrell, you're up.
Thank you. Thank you again for the opportunity, Kevin, Angelique, and the chamber and all in the audience. There are two visions of Sacramento that kind of ping-pong back and forth. There are those who say that Sacramento should be happy with where it's at, city of great neighborhoods and trees, and that we shouldn't worry about growth. And then there are those who say, you know, this city should build on the arena momentum, and we ought to become cosmopolitan, with vibrancy in every part of our city, and we ought to be a destination city. Now, we don't have to make a choice between the two, because I think we can have both. Certainly, if I had to make a choice, I say there's no looking back, we go forward. Because enhancing the economic base will be of great benefit to all of our neighborhoods. To be able to afford better parks, to be able to afford more youth programs, to be able to afford public safety, be able to invest in the arts and economic development. And in some ways, the leadership of our city, the mayors of our city, have reflected that ping pong back and forth. Think about it. Mayor Rudin, Mayor Cerna, Mayor Fargo, Mayor Johnson. And now there's another choice. I believe I am uniquely qualified at this time in our history to actually be the best of both of those worlds and both of those philosophies. Not only because of what I've done, but because of what I can do and what I can deliver for this city. I look forward to a great campaign. I look forward to winning. I look forward to serving with Angelique. And I look forward to great things ahead for our city. Thank you.
2 minutes, closing remarks.
Yeah. Well, first of all, just thank you so much for spending your evening with us and listening. And thank you again to the Chamber. What an incredible opportunity. And to anybody who's watching at home, you know, thank you for putting this much energy and effort into a mayor's race that's still a few months out. For me, I love Sacramento. There's one job I want. I want to be your mayor. I want to bring everything that I've learned so far as your council member, every bit of energy that I've got to the table. I want to move Sacramento forward. I'm not a candidate that looks back. I am not a candidate that was part of the Ann Rudin or Heather Fargo years. But I want to be the candidate that's part of the next years. I hope that when you look at me, that you see a person that represents a future for Sacramento that would fight for you. You chose to live here, or you chose to invest here, you chose to start your business here, you chose to be a part of what's happening in Sacramento. For that, I want you to succeed, and I want to be your partner. So tonight, I'm really simply asking this of the chamber. I want you to stay with me. We're on course. We can keep going. Let's do that. For those of you who are not in the chamber but are voters in the city of Sacramento, I hope tonight has moved you closer to a decision. I hope that you've learned a little bit more about me as a person and who's supporting me and what I'm about. And I hope you'll consider voting for me as mayor. I certainly have the qualifications. I'm certainly ready, and there's absolutely no doubt that I want to be your mayor. For 4 years, for 8 years, for as long as you'll have me. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks to both of you. Our time is up, so a big thanks, first of all, to Sac Metro Chamber, Sac Metro PAC, and of course to Access Sacramento. Thanks for watching.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks,
Great
Darrell.
job. You did a good job.
Thank you. Oh, your hands all sweaty.